Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey, it's Jen. Welcome back to the Bible for Busy People. Have you experienced a miraculous moment? All of my pregnancies felt like miracles to me, but especially my first. We found out while we were in the middle of a season of infertility. We were going through tests and just getting no answers. I remember the distress felt really personal and sometimes very hidden. I felt alone in it. But God kept showing up in incredible ways through that very difficult process. Yesterday, we talked about Elisha's personal friendship with the Shunammite woman, and today we're going to look at 3 more miracles that are in the same chapter, 2 Kings chapter 4. Starting in verse 1, it says, "The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, 'Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves.' Elisha replied to her, 'How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?' 'Your servant has nothing there at all,' she said, 'except a small jar of olive oil.' Elisha said, 'Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side.' She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, 'Bring me another one.' But he replied, 'There is not a jar left.' Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, 'Go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left.'" Does this story sound familiar? In 1 Kings 17, Elijah met a woman in Zarephath, also a widow, who was in dire circumstances. And similarly, what little she had in flour and oil continued to be replenished for her and her son and Elijah as long as they needed during the drought. She too had a son who died and was raised to life like the Shunammite woman from yesterday. We've talked in the past about how even though women had certain agency, they still lived in a society where they were dependent on a husband for provision. In the grief of losing her husband and her very real need to figure out how to provide for her family, this woman also had to face demanding creditors and overwhelming debt. It was legal for the creditors to take her sons as slaves. The widow went to Elisha for help as a man of God, and Elisha asked what she had. The woman didn't even consider the oil. But even the little she had was enough, and even the little that we have is enough for God to do something with. God is able and God is willing. Then Elisha gave some advice that doesn't check out. He says to go get more jars, not oil, from their neighbors, just for that little bit of oil, and then to pour the oil into each jar until it's filled. He didn't technically promise anything, but certainly she knew that a miracle was on the way. And yet, she still had to choose to act. It wasn't enough to have faith that God would make the oil increase. She had to get the jars, shut the door, and pour the oil. This miracle was a community affair. They had to ask for help and receive it from neighbors, and the sons themselves were involved, which I think is really cool. Sometimes what we pass on to our children is less in what we tell them and more in what we invite and include them into, joining them in faithful acts and watching God provide. Not only did God provide a way out of their debt, but also gave them enough to live on. Just that and no more. The oil stopped when it needed to. Next, we're reading down in verse 38, which says, Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in that region. While the company of the prophets was meeting with him, he said to his servant, "Put on the large pot and cook some stew for these prophets." One of them went out into the fields to gather herbs and found a wild vine and picked as many of its gourds as his garment could hold. When he returned, he cut them up into a pot of stew, though no one knew what they were. The stew was poured out for the men, but as they began to eat it, they cried out, "Man of God, there is death in the pot," and they could not eat it. Elisha said, "Get some flour." He put it into the pot and said, "Serve it to the people to eat." And there was nothing harmful in the pot. A man came from Baal Shalisha, bringing the man of God 20 loaves of barley bread baked from the first ripe grain, along with some heads of new grain. "Give it to the people to eat," Elisha said. "How can I set this before 100 men?" his servant asked. But Elisha answered, "Give it to the people to eat, for this is what the Lord says. They will eat and have some left over." Then he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over according to the word of the Lord. As we read next, there was a famine, and God worked through Elisha to feed people. When it came to the stew, one of the servants tried to find items to add, but actually added something poisonous. David Guzik, who wrote the Enduring Word commentary, said that it may have been a wild cucumber, which would have tasted bitter, so that explains the reaction, and it could have caused death in a large enough quantity. Guzik says instead of trying to get all the poisonous stuff out of the stew, instead he added something good. Flour, the stuff you use to make bread. When wholesome food came into the pot, it changed everything. It kind of feels like a strange and maybe side story, but as I was contemplating it, I was thinking about all the terrible things that go on in the world, things that we wish were removed or we wish we could see changed. And it isn't necessarily our job to remove the poison from this world. What makes a difference is adding in the transformative word and power of God. That is how we bring the kingdom and how we can be part of removing the poison. And then finally, there is a foreshadowing of Jesus feeding thousands of people. Elisha and his servant fed 100 people with 20 loaves of bread. Now, I'm not great at math, but that kind of seems doable, right? Like 20 loaves of bread, you would think is quite a bit. Maybe they were small loaves. They were going through a famine. Maybe these people were hungrier than most. But all of that to say, all of these miracles point to God's care and provision in times of distress, of hunger and debt and crisis. These show the power of community and how much we need each other. God works through our community to bring about miracles. So I'm wondering how you're doing in your community. How are you guys working together to provide miracles for the well-being of others? I'll leave you with that. Let's talk again tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.